The studio lights beamed with a practiced brightness, bathing the stage in a soft golden glow that made everything seem polished, perfect, and under control. Tamron Hall, poised in her elegant chair, looked every bit the master of the moment, confident, composed, and ready for a conversation that millions at home were eager to watch. Across from her sat Prince Harry, his presence commanding without effort, a figure who had carried the weight of two worlds, the traditions of British royalty and the independence of carving his own path outside it. This was no ordinary interview. The build-up had been intense, with tabloids speculating for weeks about what Harry might say, whether he would open up about his family tensions, or whether he would stay guarded. Producers had carefully crafted the questions, yet there was always the unpredictable element that comes with live television. The audience filling the studio knew it too. Some leaned forward in excitement, their eyes fixed on Harry, while others whispered quietly to each other, bracing for sparks. Tamron began softly, her tone carrying a warmth that made viewers feel like they were part of an intimate conversation. She asked about fatherhood, what it meant to raise his children away from the palace, how he balanced privacy with a world that always seemed hungry for his story. Harry's face softened. He spoke of mornings with his children, of laughter in the garden, of wanting them to grow up with the freedom he had never truly known. The audience nodded and smiled. For a while, it was easy, even tender. But as the questions deepened, a subtle shift began. Tamron leaned into her gift as a journalist, drawing out not only what her guest wanted to say but also what her audience wanted to hear. Harry, she said with calm precision, you've spoken a lot about protecting your family and distancing yourself from the pressures of the monarchy. But some critics say you've also made choices that keep you in the spotlight, especially with your book and interviews. How do you respond to those who feel you can't have privacy and publicity at the same time? The question hung in the air. Harry's expression changed. The softness faded, replaced by a guarded firmness. He straightened in his chair, and for the first time, his reply carried an edge. With all due respect, Tamron, he said, his voice steady but sharp, that's a narrative tabloids have been spinning for years. It's not the truth. I haven't asked for the spotlight, it follows me. What I've done is tell my story on my own terms. There's a big difference between sharing my life and being hunted for it. A low murmur rippled through the audience. The tension was still manageable, but it was rising, like a kettle just beginning to whistle. Tamron, unshaken, nodded thoughtfully, but her eyes did not waver. She pressed further, her voice even but unyielding. I understand that, but when you publish a memoir or give televised interviews, it does invite questions. Isn't it fair for the public to expect answers to the controversies that come with those choices? Harry's hands tightened slightly around the armrest of his chair, his knuckles whitening under the studio light. His voice grew louder, not in anger but in firm resistance. There's a difference between fair questions and the same old accusations dressed up as concern. I came here to have an honest conversation, not to be cornered. My life has been reduced to headlines for too long. I won't sit here and let it happen again. Gasps echoed softly from the audience, not because of yelling, but because of the rawness in his tone. Some nodded in support, their faces sympathetic, while others exchanged looks that said, this is about to get interesting. Tamron, however, did not flinch. She adjusted in her seat, her demeanor a picture of calm authority. Prince Harry, she said, her voice level, every guest who sits in this chair knows that difficult questions come with the conversation. My role is not to attack but to seek clarity, for myself, for the audience, and for the truth. That's journalism. The words landed like a gavel. The room, already taut, seemed to stretch thinner with silence. Harry exhaled sharply, his frustration clear in the way he shook his head. The cameras zoomed in on his face, catching the mix of defiance and fatigue in his expression. What had started as a friendly exchange was now a clash between two powerful presences, one determined to protect his story, the other equally determined to draw it out. For the audience, the moment was electric. For Harry, it was a reminder of the very battle he thought he had left behind, a battle where he was not just a man, but a symbol, constantly expected to defend and explain himself. And for Tamron, it was a line she could not cross back from. The interview had shifted, and everyone in the studio knew it. The air inside the studio had grown heavy, almost suffocating. What began as a polished, carefully crafted interview had unraveled into something raw and unpredictable. The audience, once relaxed and engaged, now sat upright, their eyes darting between Prince Harry and Tamron Hall. Every whisper, every glance exchanged carried the weight of realization. They were witnessing a moment that would be replayed and dissected for days to come. Harry leaned forward in his chair, his body no longer relaxed but tense, every muscle seemingly braced for defense. His voice, once calm and deliberate, carried a tremor of restrained frustration. "You don't understand what it's like," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "To have your life picked apart, your every word twisted, your family judged by strangers. People assume they know me because of the headlines, but those headlines are often lies. And here I am again, feeling like I've walked straight into another trap." The audience gasped, their murmurs filling the space. Some nodded, touched by his vulnerability, while others raised their brows, uncertain whether his frustration was justified or misplaced. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the flicker of emotion in his eyes. Anger, yes, but beneath it, hurt. For a man born into privilege, there was something undeniably human about his visible fatigue with being misunderstood. Tamron, ever the professional, sat tall in her chair. She did not raise her voice, nor did she falter. Her years in journalism had prepared her for tension, for moments when interviews became confrontations. With a measured calm, she replied, "Prince Harry, I do not doubt your pain. I do not doubt that the spotlight has taken its toll. But my responsibility is to ask questions, not just the ones you're comfortable with, but the ones that matter to the people listening. If you feel this was a mistake, that's your choice. But my job is not to protect you from discomfort, it's to pursue the truth." The firmness in her words was like steel wrapped in silk. She wasn't unkind, but she was unyielding. The clash between Harry's desire for protection and Tamron's duty for honesty had reached a breaking point. Harry's jaw tightened. He rose from his seat, the sudden movement sending a ripple through the room. The audience gasped again, some leaning back instinctively as though they were too close to the storm. His tall frame cast a shadow over the polished stage floor, and in that moment, it was clear, he was done. His voice dropped, low but edged with finality. "Then perhaps we are done here." Tamron didn't move. Her eyes followed him, steady and composed, as though she had anticipated this very outcome. She gave a polite, almost restrained smile. "Then thank you for your time, Prince Harry," she said, her voice measured and precise, a line drawn firmly in the sand. The producers, sensing no way back, quickly signaled the cameras. The feed cut to commercial, but the energy in the room didn't fade, it only grew louder in whispers and shocked exclamations. Security discreetly moved closer, not to interfere but to ensure order. Harry strode toward the exit, his face a mixture of indignation and exhaustion, the weight of the moment pressing down on every step. Outside the studio, the air was no lighter. Cameras from paparazzi were already waiting, their flashes lighting up the hallway as though they had been tipped off. Questions were shouted into the chaos. "Harry, why did you walk off? Was it too much? Do you regret coming?" He ignored them, his expression unreadable, though his tightened jaw said enough. Back inside, Tamron turned to her audience, the consummate host regaining control of a room that had nearly spiraled into chaos. She spoke with a calm clarity that carried both authority and grace. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "sometimes conversations don't unfold the way we expect. That is the nature of live television, and indeed, of life itself. We aim to tell stories honestly, even when honesty is uncomfortable. Tonight was one of those moments." The audience applauded, though it was not the thunderous kind one hears at the end of a typical show. It was mixed, hesitant in some corners, strong in others, reflecting the divide in how people felt about what they had just witnessed. Some admired Harry for standing his ground, others respected Tamron for holding her line of questioning. Either way, it was a moment that neither side could erase. By the time the broadcast ended, the outside world had already caught wind of what had happened. Clips surfaced on social media within minutes, dissected frame by frame. Hashtags trended, opinions flooded in, and the digital echo chamber roared louder than the studio ever could. Some called Harry brave, others labeled him thin-skinned. Some praised Tamron's professionalism, while others accused her of being too harsh. But for those who had sat in that studio, who had felt the air grow heavier with every exchange. The memory was personal. They hadn't just watched an interview. They had witnessed a clash of wills, of values, of two people standing their ground on a stage too small to contain them both. And as the night wore on, one truth remained undeniable. This was not an interview anyone would forget soon. It was a collision of vulnerability and professionalism, frustration and resolve. Prince Harry had walked off, Tamron Hall had remained seated, and between them lingered a silence that spoke louder than any words left unsaid.